get a really good player at the top of the draft, and that's not even a question. But I did, my daughter goes to Boston University. I know about the kid. I was like all excited leading up to this thing. I just felt like it was going to happen. There's no need to be disappointed. You'll get a great player.
Oh yeah, no need to be disappointed at all. If look, who doesn't like winning lotteries? And so we would have liked to have won, but you know what? We're happy to sit at 2, to stick at 2, and we're going to get a really, really good player, and we're really, really excited coming out of the lottery draw, and looking forward to putting in the work to decide where we go with that number 2 pick.
So, Kyle, as we sit here after the first season of Bedard, and Connor Bedard had a good enough year where nobody's going to be surprised if he wins the Calder Trophy as a Rookie of the Year. In terms of the progress organizationally that you have made, with the draft capital that you have, with the cap space that you have, how would you describe exactly what you're on the verge of enjoying?
Yeah, no, I think we're in a really, really exciting spot right now. The last couple of years have seen us accumulate some really, really special talent through the draft. Obviously Connor being the main headliner among them, but great depth at all the positions. Draft capital moving forward, cap space moving forward, and I think we're positioned very, very well to maintain the upward trajectory that I think we will see. Not only have we seen in the prospect pool the last couple of years, but hopefully soon on the ice as well. So we're in a really good spot. We're really excited about where we're at, and I think it's only going to get better in June.
I have no idea how the draft will go or who's going to be the kind of guy that everyone decides on. We've heard about a Belarusian defenseman and a KHL player. We've heard about some Canadian centers. It'll all kind of flesh out as we get ever forward. I'm just curious that when I hear a KHL player, I just wonder, are there like pragmatic concerns that come into play in terms of dealing with getting a player away from Putin, if you will? Is that just me having like some kind of international conspiracy in my head, or is that a real thing?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit in your head, but I think that it is a little bit of a wrinkle, right? It's not like you're drafting a player out of major junior in the greater Toronto area, right? Like there's definitely another aspect to the work that you have to put in and the research that you have to do. Anytime a player's under contract for future years, it bears further investigation and understanding as to what the player's motivation is. Do they want to come to North America? Do they want to play in the NHL? Is that what's driving their ambition? And so, it definitely comes into play, but it hasn't necessarily been the case in recent years where we've seen a situation, drive too many teams away from not taking players from a certain country or in a certain situation. And so, it's something that we'll look into, and you have to do your due diligence on situations like that. But, in the recent past, it hasn't been too detrimental to a player's draft stock.
Well, whether it is the Russian winger Demidov or the Belarusian defenseman Levshinov, when you look at organizationally what you have in terms of depth at certain positions, do you go into this draft leaning one way or another, Kyle? Do you think, okay, we need to get offense to help Bedard realize his potential, or do you think like, well, we could really use a good defenseman because he's too good to pass up? How do you approach this from a hockey perspective?
From a hockey perspective, I'm really proud of the job that our amateur staff has done in finding a balance of both to this point. Obviously at the NHL level, we haven't seen many of these prospects come up and play yet, but we know they're coming, and they're coming at every position. And so we feel like we're standing in a position of strength right now where, we don't need a certain type of forward. We don't need a certain type of defenseman. So we can just go with the player that we think fits best and the player that we think will impact our group the most long term. And so that's a really nice spot to be in, where we don't have to reach for a certain position. I don't philosophically think that's necessarily the best thing to do in the NHL draft, just given how far out some of these players normally are. They're by contrast, it's different than something like the NFL draft, where these players can step in on day one and through a couple rounds, potentially. And so that's just not the case in the NHL. NHL draft, they're so young, and so I've stuck to the best player available philosophy, and I think that's what we'll do. But luckily, we've got strength at many positions where we don't necessarily have to target one position over another. So we're pretty fortunate in that sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the NFL draft, because we know that when teams go into drafts, they're looking at the quarterback position. And it's not necessarily they're looking for a quarterback, but they're looking at, how do we support the quarterback? How do we make the quarterback better? How do we get to the quarterback? How do we go after the quarterback? And it's different, I suppose, in the NHL, although I'm hoping that your philosophy is going to be, how do we support Bedard? How do we help Bedard? How do we make Bedard better? Am I wrong to simplify it like that?
I don't necessarily think so. You're always looking to surround your high-end talent with players that will not only complement them, but elevate them, but allow them to elevate those around them. And so you're always looking to do that. You're always looking at what players are not only in your prospect pool that can do that, in the medium and long term, but also the players that can do that, in the shorter term. And so it's always a balancing act, and it's hard, right? It's not easy to find those players. It's traditionally done via the draft, just because you don't normally find bargain bin players that can elevate or help out a guy like Connor or a high end player in the NHL. And so this is the way our system works in the NHL. But you're always looking to do that, and you hope that in elevating your best players or putting them in the best situation to succeed, that you're elevating your group as well.
Just curious, because there is a lot of buzz surrounding the future, but the present and the recent past, that was tough to take, Kyle. I mean, you look at what the Blackhawks endured, 23, 53, and 6. It was a long season for a lot of the people on the ice, a lot of the fans watching as well. Postseason, during the exit interview, Seth Jones had some very interesting things to say about the culture and what he endured and what he didn't want to put up with moving forward. A couple other teammates kind of agreed and echoed those sentiments. How concerned were you, and what was your reaction to those comments by Seth Jones and others?
No, I'm not concerned about it. It's just, it was a tough year. There's no way around that. When you finish second last in the league, you're not going to come away feeling good. And the players felt that, the coaches felt that, the management felt that, and to some extent, that's a symptom of where we're at in our rebuild. It's very difficult to win in this league, especially when we've had to do the roster, I'll call it deconstruction to some extent, that we've had to undertake the last few years. But you know what? It's time. We've got some really good veterans. We've got some really good young players coming in. It's time to start taking those next steps. And let's be honest as well. Yeah, steering clear of some of the crazy injury situation that we had this year is going to be crucial to that. But that happens, and you have to overcome that. And hopefully we don't have to overcome that in the future. But it's time to take some positive steps here, and even just something like play with the puck more and impose our will in the game a little bit more. And that'll be up to the young players taking a step. That'll be up to the veteran players, elevating their games, and then we'll see what type of additions we can make to the roster in the off season. It's whether it's trade, free agency, or young players graduating the NHL. You never know what with trade and free agency what's available, right? And so that's a very tough thing to predict, especially this far out. But hopefully we can bring in a few players to elevate the group and just kind of, make some positive strides and not finish second last again in the season. I don't think anyone wants to see that.
Yeah, I got to tell you that you have you got a lot of really interesting prospects that you signed some guys at the end of the year. I know you gave Lucas Reichel another couple years, and you got the Vlasic, the defenseman, done with a deal. We know who the younger players are, and we know there are more on the way. And obviously, you got a lot of picks. Do you need to tap into free agency more? Is that what you're talking about? Do you need to make a bigger move in that market just to kind of make sure you have a chance to take the next step?
That's always a little bit of a double-edged sword where, there are some merits to dipping into free agency and they can help in the short term. But what we're doing here as well is, we're looking to build something special that can be together for a long time. And sometimes, in the NHL, free agents come available at a minimum age of, call it around 27 years old. And that's not early in their careers. And so if you have to sign a player long-term at that point, you want to make sure that you're making the right decisions long-term and you're not regretting something 2-3 years down the road because it felt good a couple of years ago. Right. And it placated a subset of people. It's about being responsible. It's about doing the right things for the team and the health of the team long term. And the NHL salary cap is unforgiving. We've seen that here in the past, and teams around the league have seen that. And once you give up your salary cap space, you are not getting it back. They're guaranteed contracts. You just have to ride out those contracts, or you have to pay people, another team, a really, really hefty amount, which we've benefited from in the recent past here, to take those contracts. And so it's about being very responsible with our salary cap space. It's about making sure all this work we've done to acquire this young, high-end talent, that we can afford that to keep them around when the time comes, and we don't have to give them away because we paid someone in free agency that, it is not necessarily living up to their contract anymore. And so, those are all the things that come into play. It doesn't mean you don't look at free agency, because we certainly will to some extent to bolster the group. But when we're looking long-term, we have to keep that long-term vision in mind. And the salary cap is a big, big factor in making sure that we can put a very, very quality team together and keep talent here in Chicago rather than having to give it away before we see the fruits of our labor.
Boy, I love how responsible that answer is, Kyle. But I also look at the salary cap and I see $34 million of room, and I think that as a lot of fans is like, okay, you make sense, and you don't want to make a mistake that you'll regret later. And then I'm hearing from friends who are Hawks fans, and like, okay, is Patrick Kane coming back? And what about Steven Stamkos? And those are guys who would be expensive. And then I love the Mitch Marner rumor, which has surfaced this week. The point being that if you have to get a short-term gain to maybe get some firepower and to be a winning team or threaten to be a playoff team as early as next year, do you have to dip into those resources? Do you have to maybe take advantage of the cap space to buy some credibility that you may regret later, but you also may benefit from now?
Well, it's always the balancing act here. You're weighing every single situation and possibility that comes your way, and you'd be irresponsible not to do that. And if it can benefit your group short and long term, then you know what, you have to consider it. You have to weigh the possibilities of anything that comes your way and that's available to you. But you have to be very, very careful because the last thing we want to do is put ourselves in a situation where in a couple of years we've boxed ourselves into a corner where we've got to move out someone that we really don't want to move out because we've spent too much on the cap, and it goes very, very fast. It's not easy, all the numbers that people are rightfully throwing out at me with all of our cap space and what we've got. That goes so fast. It goes so quickly. We've seen it happen time and time again, and we don't want to be overly cautious, but we also don't want to be jump the gun here and get too excited too soon. They're improvements we want to make, but it has to be done responsibly with both short and long term objectives in mind.
Not only do you have the number two overall pick, you got the 20th pick, you got 3 second rounders. When you're putting together mock drafts, do you just look at the potential haul and kind of smile to yourself? There's a lot of good talent coming this way. Yeah, no,
it's really exciting. We've got two picks in the first, 3 in the second, 2 in the third, and that's either that could be some really good prospects, that could be, but more than anything, it's great options. And so whether you trade back, you accumulate more, you try and move up. We tried to move up last year, and we couldn't, no matter how hard we tried. And so sometimes that sort of thing's out of your control. But then it's also you can take that to the trade market as well, or you can push those to future years. And so it just gives you options. If you don't have the currency, then you can't play in certain markets. And luckily, we've got the currency to play in any market that should come our way, and we can use that to our advantage and give ourselves different avenues to improve the team short and long term. And so we've put in a lot of work and had to deal with some serious pain on the ice to accumulate those assets. And so we want to be using them in the best way possible to impact the long-term viability of what we're building here. And so it's really exciting.
How do you watch Connor Bedard play for Team Canada in the Worlds without fearing injury? Can you enjoy that? And how much value is there in having him be as competitive and represent Canada as he is?
Yeah, I don't think there's any fear factor in that. It's great experience for him. He gets to be around some of the best players in the world and play against some of the best players in the world. And anytime you can represent your country is something special. And we've got a number of players from the organization that are going to do so over the next few weeks. And so it's a credit to not only Connor, but the rest of the group that they've been chosen to represent their countries and experience some great hockey and get some really good experience under their belt. And so you get excited for them, you're happy for them, and it's great for the Blackhawks when your players are playing world championships.
Do you have any idea as to when everybody arrives or when you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many guys in the system, so many guys that haven't even gotten to the system. Do you know? I mean, obviously, we talked about the end of the year, and you're bringing up the kid from Notre Dame and Frankie Nazar, and you're kind of, those guys are signed. But when will the rest of these guys start really arriving sort of en masse? Do you have to be careful about getting too eager with that, like these sports people do?
Yeah, no, you want to be responsible when you turn players pro, because obviously there's no real going back after that. Once they're in pro, they're in pro, and so you want to make sure they can handle that both from a physical standpoint, even from an emotional standpoint, a maturity point of view. And so you want to be well informed and make sure the player is well informed. Just take Frank for example, if he thought and we thought the best course of action was that he needed another year at Michigan, then that's what he would have done. But he and ourselves felt that he was ready to turn pro, and so he did. And it's all about just evaluating both the person and the player for their readiness as you go. And so we'll probably take a look at our players that are in college, Europe, and junior next year, and see which ones are progressing the way that that requires the next step to professional hockey. And I think next year we should see a few more. We've got some really nice players that went in the first couple rounds the last few years that are really close. They're really on the brink of potential for turning pro and taking that next